Lately I've been thinking about ownership. It sounds boring, I know, but give this a moment. As you can hear, I'm from South Africa. Well, maybe that's news to you. And I live in the States. I've been here since '84. And I became a citizen in the 90s. And yet, you ask me, who am I? Am I South African or am I an American? I retain my South African citizenship. And I find myself in an interesting position. And it directly relates to ownership. I'll start with Boy Scouts. I was a Boy Scout as a child. Cub Scout, then Boy Scouts, and then our troop disbanded, unfortunately, so I couldn't finish up. My cousin, on the other hand, became a triple Springbok Scout in South Africa. Sea Scout, Air Scout, and regular Land Scout. So I missed out on something great. I enjoyed it thoroughly, especially horsing around with the other boys. So here I'm in America, and today I'm a Scout Master. I did my Wood Badge training, which is the highest training you go through as a Scout Master, or as a Scout Leader, sorry. And in this respect, recently I realized that learning and feeling and being in that role as Scoutmaster is not as easy as I thought it would be. I find that I don't feel what I'm supposed to feel in a certain way. And it all relates to being an American. When they present the flag, the national anthem and these things, I don't really know it, and I feel I'm an outsider. Now freeze frame for a second. The same is true for me right now in South Africa. The anthem that I grew up with is no longer the anthem. Since I've left and I've been on this side of the ocean, the anthem changed, the flag changed, lots of things changed. In fact, it's very often repeated that someone of my skin color will never ever be president of that country. So I've been officially declared a second-class citizen. So my ownership, my feeling of belonging, my feeling of being in South Africa is no longer first class. Granted, when I grew up, the government did that exact thing to those of other races, because those who looked like me governed that country and did that to others. Now it's being done to us. And note the word us. In other words, I have been pushed into a box of being white. Whether I like it or not, that's how I'm seen, and that's how I'm judged, and that's how I'm categorized. In South Africa, I have to declare my race because we've got policies against people like me to ensure certain behaviors and actions happen based on my race. And so, being a second-class citizen in South Africa robs you of ownership. No matter what skin color you are, if you're a second-class citizen, you're robbed of certain rights. Come to the States now. Well, I'm supposed to be a first-class citizen here. And on paper, that's all true. However, because I don't have my roots here, and I struggle to fit the vernacular, I sound a little different, don't I? My word choice is not the same. It's obvious that I'm from somewhere on the other side of the fence. So it's just a natural selection that I'm not part of the local situation. So what's the impact of that? I find that I learn with difficulty. I don't retain things because that ownership is not there. I don't feel I possess it. So I don't care to remember it. Interesting how you see that happen. Like I've seen that with Americans in the military go overseas and they can live for 10, 20, 30, 100 years somewhere else. Never become part of it, never acquire that culture, never learn it, never feel it. Because we're not from here, we're from somewhere else. And this is not our place. So somehow that makes the logic turn to where you don't stick, you don't go there, and you hold on to what's yours. So now to an important point related to this. It's maybe a surprise twist, but yet a very important point. So I find myself struggling to belong and to feel, and it relates to that feel because I don't feel it. I cannot fake it to say, you know, that's nonsense, I just belong. You have to feel it. Often Americans ask me, so how long have you been in this country? You think you'll become a citizen ever? Gee, I've been a citizen in about 20 years now. You know, oh, have you ever, you know, so you voted? Huh. Okay, interesting thoughts that come through with that. Yet, now I'm going to switch to race. Because now I'm going to show to you something that I can relate to those who don't belong or historically have not belonged in this country. I'll start with the African Americans. This used to be a white America. Everything was white and dominated by a Protestant culture. And the African Americans were obviously second-class citizens. Oh, then we changed the constitution and they became first-class citizens, except they weren't. And they retained that status of second-class citizens. Their vote was not cherished, was not encouraged, was not celebrated. It was squashed, it was manipulated, and it was frustrated, to be mild about. And so they did not belong. Now you take the African American child in a culture where you'd better know your place and stay there. And this country is not yours, it's ours. You're just being accommodated here. And now you take that child and you put him or her in a historically white school. And you expect great learning, great ownership, being like the rest of us. We've given you the full opportunity. It's not happening. It's not natural. It's not easy. You can understand in so many ways how that wet blanket is thrown over their potential and over their culture. I've seen that blanket lifted in South Africa. I was amazed going back how suddenly intelligent these black people are that used to seem like they weren't up to much. How they flourish and how absolutely stunned and impressed I am. Shame on me for not having recognized that and cherished that from day one. But that's the way I grew up, that's the way you perceive the world, that's the way you assume life is. And as a child you don't think deeper. But now as an adult I've experienced profound differences. Now do you see many that still behave in the old school ways? Yeah, you do. But do you see those who've now flourished because they are first-class citizens? Yes. Now, sad comment that I have to reflect back and say, yeah, but now I'm a second-class citizen. Wouldn't it be ideal if Mandela's vision can be materialized, that we can all embrace and say we're all first-class citizens and enjoy our diversity and the richness that has brought us together? Wouldn't that be wonderful? That's what I'm hoping for, and that's what I'm working for. Interesting that I live now in two worlds, and I experience something similar in both worlds. So, what about America? Well, once again, the observer, the outsider, looking into it. When I arrived at University of Wisconsin in 2002, I sat on many committees where I was rather surprised and stunned and delighted at the diversity the university offered. And the faculty was so diverse that we were from the Ukraine, from Russia, from China, from Mongolia, from all over Europe, from South America, from Africa, many countries in Africa, from the islands. I delighted in associating with all these colleagues from so many interesting places. But I noticed one very, very particular behavior that was troubling to me. I noticed the African American colleagues did not feel home like the rest of us. Yet everybody else felt at home. Yes, we were a bubble. We weren't America. We were academics in America, and we cherished and loved and associated as such. And it was our scholarship and our thinking and our teaching and this kind of world that brings us together that we all cherish. So, yet my African American scholars had a different take in many cases. They still related to them being in America and America's not being in them. The way America is in the white colleagues, and that ownership was something they wanted so badly but did not feel, and their expressions often included this concept of us and you, this divide between them and us. And I couldn't understand that. Why not accept that we are, because I was looking at it from the lens of we are academics, and all these other differences and colleagues with different colors and heritages and so forth all seem to embrace each other and we feel one, except my African American colleagues did not feel and share that in large part. That was disturbing to me, to see that. Then Obama came. And did that change things? It did. Did it leave things the same? It did. It did it both. Now that's a very, very important point to recognize. It did it both. Now obviously if you're a binary thinker you could say, make your choice. Which is it? I'm going to explain this did it both by going back in my own history. My ancestry is Huguenot. That means French Protestant. And we were evicted or had to flee or die in the late 1600s. And my ancestry fled to Holland, eventually ended up in South Africa, whereas they spread to Germany, to England, to America. They went far as they fled to save their lives. And so in South Africa, growing up, I thought, gee, I'd like to belong to the South African Huguenot Society. It's my heritage, it's my roots. But I'm not a Protestant anymore. And I went to this conference as a Christian, but not as a Protestant. But I didn't flaunt that, I didn't relate to that, I just simply went as a Huguenot. Very, very happy to be warmly associated with those of the similar heritage and what we share. Then one old man stood up and said, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to reaffirm that this society is here exclusively for Calvinists. I'm not a Calvinist, although I love my fellow Calvinists and warmly associate with them and have no issue with their persuasions. And here I was told, you're not welcome. It's for Calvinists. It's not for Huguenots, it's for Calvinists. In other words, if I were to be a black convert to Calvinism, oh, welcome, brother. But as a Huguenot, I'm not welcome in the Huguenot society because I'm not a Calvinist. Well, I realized I'm at an interesting juncture right there. I could put my tail between my legs and leave the room and say, dang it, I don't belong. Or I could say, excuse me, I'm a Calvinist. Sorry. I am a Protestant in heritage. I'm a Huguenot. I'm proud of it. and I belong. So I decided I will not be worked out of here. I know it's one or two who think this way. It's not all of them. And I will stand up and jovially and happily, not in a disgruntled fashion, claim my place. And let that minority, that vocal minority trying to isolate and insulate me, try their thing. I'm not accepting it. I belong. I'm here. I'm home. And such I went forth. And it worked. I belonged, I was part of it, I enjoyed it, and I could not be worked out. And those with their voices of concern and warning faded and went back into the hole where they belong. That was an important shift because I want to bring up the concept of critical mass. If there's enough that stand up and claim, it works. But what would you say would be enough? That's the interesting challenge and debate. Look at women claiming their place in society. At some point, there were not enough of them to claim their place. And then one day, we had enough. They claimed their place, and it worked. And their rightful place was recognized. And so it is with many senses of discrimination, where you do not belong, and then the tide changes, enough claim it, and that magic happens. Where now, yes, there are still some who feel you don't belong, but they keep quiet, and they are now the fringe element, and not you who rightfully belong. So that concept of a critical mass is really what matters in this debate. So coming back to the African Americans' role in American society. In the days of Jesse Jackson, Martin Luther King, they did not belong, but they were fiercely fighting for that right, which was theirs. And that battle was very significant. Those were the warriors who paved the way for the African American to claim their place as fellow Americans. Then Obama came along, and I see it in a biblical perspective. Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, away from the flesh pots of Egypt, into Sinai. And he prepared his people to be a free people, but they weren't free yet. They still had that mentality of Egypt will provide nourishment, and many yearned back for what they had, ironically. And then they came to the Jordan River, and that was where Moses' role ended. And they had to journey in the desert for 40 years, preparing them to become a new generation, a new free people. And then they entered as a free people into Israel and claimed a new culture, a new people, a free people. Beautiful, that phases from slavery to freedom. And the Obama era opened up that freedom. Obama was not part of the struggle. He doesn't behave that way. What I mean by behave that way is, yes, there is a you and there is a us, and we are wounded and we are disenfranchised and we are fighting to be part of a whole. And you people have kept us from this. So that you and I divide is strongly there. And you're fighting for our people that need to be part of the whole. Obama is part of the new generation. He is part of the whole. Happily and comfortably part of the whole. And that is the magic where now I see in many cases a wonderful difference as we associate, where there is no sense of you and us. As I associate with my colleagues and my friends, where blackness is shoe sizeness, or hand sizeness. So what? We all have different hand sizes and shoe sizes. Who cares? It is about us. And us is really diverse and beautiful. And it's fun. That critical mass is now shifting, where the unity is there. And we now experience and feel that. That's wonderful and beautiful. It's a dream happening. But are there still those that are disenfranchised, that feel fearful about setting foot in the white man's world? Yeah, that's still there. But we've broken through into bringing everybody together. And this momentum needs to now put out those flames of resistance, of making America whole, of bringing this country to a wholeness where we all, not theoretically, but emotionally and physically and in every way embrace each other. This is a country of diverse roots, and we cherish that, and we enjoy that. And that diversity makes us brilliant and beautiful. So, then I look back to South Africa. Initially, as Mandela came to power, it seemed we will be a rainbow nation, and that's exactly what Mandela stood for. But there were those in the wings that felt differently. And now that Mandela has passed, they are rising and claiming that this is the country for blacks only. And all you other settlers and foreigners, go home or deal with reality. You don't belong, it's ours, and we are being nice by tolerating you, so watch it. Isn't that sad? So now the question comes back to critical mass. Are we going to retreat as now non-black South Africans and behave according to the dictates of these aggressors trying to basically dismember the Constitution and claim a new reality? Are we going to accept that? Or will we claim our place with many of our black brothers and sisters who embrace the diversity of our country and love it and cherish it? Or will we let those disgruntled ones who want to isolate and insulate those who are different from themselves in skin color as second class? That's the big question. Because we cannot flourish if you're not first class. You cannot. I've experienced it by still struggling in this country to feel first class. Ironically, I've spoken about the African-American relationship and reality because I relate to it now. I understand it, ironically enough. And mine is a little more difficult because I will never shake my accent. My kids are regular Americans. They fully embraced. But the sound of my voice keeps me from being fully embraced. That labels me as that strange thing who washes floors. So I hope that these thoughts will be helpful as we reflect both in South Africa and in America on our identity and what is it we really want.